guys behind the scenes getting everything together. So thank you very much, Joni. Let's introduce Michael. So Michael is a rare combination. He is a working creative professional. He's also trained and skilled in facilitating creativity, innovation, breakthroughs for leaders, entrepreneurs. He's a master creativity and innovation coach. So many things in that area. But what many people don't know is he's also a filmmaker. He's won 5 South African Film and Television Awards. He's currently working on writing and producing 3 projects based on South African novels. So he bases his training and coaching philosophy on the fact that the most important innovation you will ever make is to innovate yourself. And the best way to free a team to innovate is to begin with shifting the minds of every team member. His concept of innotivity is derived from combining creativity and innovation into one word, because they are 2 parts of one process that begins with confronting a problem and ends with resolving it. He is the creator of the Innovation Explosion, training based on this approach, a step-by-step method proven to significantly up the creativity levels of all who have gone through it. And his book is Innotivity, a mind makeover manual, and that will be published next year. And so his talk this evening, well, it's evening for us, maybe morning for you, maybe late night for you, I'm not sure. But he is going to be talking about the source of your creative inspiration. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Ian. I'd like to start by asking everybody just to take a deep breath. Right, just breathe in and breathe out. Now continue breathing, and now turn on your camera so we can breathe together and see each other breathe. You could turn on your cameras so we can all be together. Again, breathe in and breathe out. And one more time, breathe in and out. Now, I'd like to ask you to keep breathing during my talk. I know that might sound funny because you breathe all the time, but you'll notice that the experience of breathing the way I've asked you to is a little bit different than the way we normally do, right? And it's more conscious, more careful, and you're much more aware of it. So before we get started, I just want to know how you guys are doing. So give me on a scale of 0 to 5 to 10. How you doing? 0, 5, 10. I'm on a 10. And then some people are typing in the chat, which is good. It's a good start. So good evening, good morning, good night, whatever it is where you are. When I was younger, I used a lot of marijuana. And I especially loved using a lot of marijuana because it made me feel inspired. In fact, when I was 27 years old, specifically, I spent about 3 months in a small Moravian village, writing my second novel. I was getting high all day and being amazed at how great my writing was, right? Now, side point, Moravia is a region east of Prague. It's well known for its wine, and I drank a lot of that as well. So, you know, the thing is, this behind me, that is Mykolaiv, and that's the village where I was. And I really had this kind of experience. It looked a lot like that, you know, fantasy, wasn't real, because the work I did wasn't really that great. In fact, that effort at inspiring myself may have ruined that novel a lot more than it helped it, because I spiraled deeper and deeper over time. Years later, some of you may know this story, I became pretty much a full-blown pothead, marijuana addict, whatever you want to call it. And that's when I learned that, you know, ganja doesn't actually inspire me at all. It's an illusion, and that's all it ever was. In fact, what we're going to find out today in my talk is that inspiration itself is mostly an illusion. And at the same time, It's not. So the thing is, we're not here today to talk about my history with addiction. I do that in a different talk. We're actually here to talk about inspiration, right? That's what we said. This thing, source of creative inspiration in your life as a speaker. Why does it matter to you, and why discuss it at this event? Well, I'd imagine there's a lot of pressure on us all as speakers to come up with new topics, right? Important things to say, stuff that really matters. Where do we draw the inspiration for that? It's a bit of an unusual topic for me because I usually like to focus on transformation, not inspiration. And I consider myself a transformational speaker, not an inspirational one. On the other hand, inspiration is a form of transformation. And the thing is that inspiration usually comes up like something that's out of our control. For example, let me show you a few slides that, make it seem like inspiration is really hard. How to get inspired, right? How to get inspired. 99 ways to get inspired. So really, like, if you look at it, how is it for you? Do you have the experience that inspiration is something that is difficult? By the way, you're still breathing? Breathe in and out. Right? Keep breathing. I asked you to keep breathing. So today we're going to look at two questions. Does creative inspiration come from inside us or from outside? All right. And the second question, how can we actually control and generate our own inspiration? And right at the very end, there's a twist to the question. And that twist will really transform your relationship to inspiration. So if you do have to leave early, I suggest you reach out to a friend on this call. Normally, I would say, make a friend, but we all know each other. So make a friend or reach out to a friend on this call right now so that they can fill you in later, because you're not going to want to miss the ending. I want to start by asking you to think about a project or a talk where you really need to be inspired and you feel you're lacking inspiration. In other words, focus on something you really want to be inspired about today and type that in the chat. What do you really want to be inspired about that's not there for you right now as an inspiration? Type that there for us so we can see what you're thinking about. Okay. No one wants to be inspired about anything. What's going on, Ian? Bruce wants to be inspired by his next product launch. Absolutely. Project that Chris is working on. So keep typing those in the chat so we can see what you want to be inspired about today. Now, again, are you still breathing? Breathe in and out. I'm going to ask you another question now. What is inspiration? If you have to define the word, what is it? Because we all talk about inspiration all the time, but do we actually know what it is? Because there's all kinds of studies I've read about inspiration and what it really means. Does it really mean like coming up with ideas, or does it actually mean getting yourself motivated? For example, there's two different things. Inspiration is energy, Ryan says. Ian also says it's energy, right? I'm going to ask you one last question before we get into the meat of things. And this is the most important question I'm going to ask you today. What inspires you? What inspires you? Some people say a glass of wine. We just heard about that, right? A glass of wine inspires them. Music, a beautiful landscape, the time of day, person they love. For me, the beach inspires me. I already told you marijuana used to inspire me a lot, doesn't anymore. So it's very important that you type this in the chat now, what it is that inspires you. Ian says people and connection. Paula says her bank balance, which is great news, right? If it's inspiring you, it must be. I hope it's good. Paul is inspired by playing his guitar, right? Mandela fulfilling his purpose. Now, what do you notice about all of these things? It seems pretty obvious that inspiration comes mostly from the outside, right? I mean, look at the list. Even something like fulfilling my purpose is doing something in the world outside us. The ocean, changing other people's lives. Inspiration comes from outside of us. It's obvious, isn't it? So, people can be inspired by almost anything. And you might see in the list that's being typed in the chat right now, something that inspires you that also inspires someone else. And you might go and look at that list and think, that's really weird. Right? In fact, some people are very inspired in the morning. Other people are not at all. Right? Some people are very inspired late at night, and other people can't stay up and do anything. So it's really very individual what inspires each of us. There's a really interesting, I'm going to show you a really interesting guy. This guy here, Yoshiro Nakamutsu. Anybody ever heard of him? This guy has over 3,000 patents. He inspires himself by diving underwater and drowning himself within an inch of death. He calls it 0.05 seconds before death. And then at that moment when his brain is starved of oxygen, that's when he gets his ideas. He built a room called his calm room without using nails and tiled in 24-karat gold. It blocks out television radio waves, and that helps him think. He has an elevator in his house, which he refuses to call an elevator. He calls it a vertical moving room. These are the things he does to inspire himself. But the interesting one to me is the breathing. He drowns himself until he can't breathe. And that inspires him. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a bit, why that's really weird. By the way, speaking of breathing, you still breathing? Hope so. Breathing in and out. Now, the fact is that for most of history, all the great thinkers knew that inspiration came from outside of us, not from inside. In fact, almost for all of history. Consider these quotes. We'll show you quickly, sharing this again. Consider these quotes. William Blake said, "I myself do nothing. The Holy Spirit accomplishes all through me." Clearly, inspiration comes from outside. Johannes Brahms says, "Straight away the ideas flow into me directly from God." Clearly from outside. Creative people have to be fed from the divine source. And if the man in black said it, it must be true. So clearly, inspiration comes from outside of us. We've seen it already in the chat. Almost everything there is clearly from outside. All of these famous people that are, very important creative thinkers have said it comes from outside. And in fact, in ancient Greece, the idea that art existed didn't even exist, right? They called art techne. This is the same root as technique and technology. It means making things. They did not have a word corresponding to what we say as create or creator. Plato in the Republic said specifically, when we say of a painter that he makes something? His answer, certainly not. He merely imitates. Because to the Greeks, nature was perfect, subject to laws, and man or humans could only discover those laws. They could not seek freedom from them. The expression creation only existed inside of the term creation ex nihilo, creation from nothing. This was something gods did. Humans could not do it. It was a mysterious act we could not attain. Art was something where we copied nature, and we were attached to rules. Creativity was irreconcilable with rules. So the artist was a discoverer, not an innovator, not an inventor. Now, the first known use of the word create in the English language was in Chaucer's The Parson's Tale in the late 1300s. The phrase is, "And although it be so that God has created all things in right order, all things are ordained and numbered." However, you can see here again, this was meant to mean God, not humans. In fact, Chaucer was quoting the Bible. So it made obvious that creative inspiration came only from the outside. Still breathing? In and out? Okay, now the idea that creativity could come from humans at all only started about 300 years ago in the Enlightenment. And the first recorded instance of this happening was from a Polish poet named Maciej Sarbewski, but he only applied it to poetry. His explicit statement was that other arts merely imitate and copy, same thing they always said in Greece, but do not create. But poetry was a creation. And the idea of this human creativity continued to meet resistance until the end of the 17th century, when André Félibien wrote for the first time that the painter creates. And in the Renaissance, the change in perspective sped up. The philosopher Marsilio Ficino wrote that the artist thinks up, ex cogitatio. My Latin's terrible, but he thinks up his works. The theoretician of architecture and painting, Leon Alberti, said that he preordains his works. Raphael said that Raphael, shaped paintings according to his own ideas, not God's. And Leonardo da Vinci, we all know Leonardo, said that he employs shapes that do not exist in nature. And this was probably the first time that anybody in history ever said that they created something that God had not done. Michelangelo said the same thing, that the artist realizes his own vision, not nature's vision. And I could go on and on and on with quotes from the Renaissance. But the basic point of it is that by the 18th century, the concept of creativity was actually appearing as a regular concept in art theory, linked with the concept of imagination. And in the 19th century, as art leaped forward, not only did art become possible to be creative, only art was creative, which created the mess that we live with today. Thankfully, in the 20th century, we began to use creativity in the sciences, nature. Then we ended up with quantum theory, concepts of theoretical physics. Until in 1950, J.P. Guilford gave an address to the American Psychological Association, in which creativity finally became a science in itself, not just recognized as something that might exist, but something that did exist and was worth studying. Now, if you're not breathing now, I encourage you to take a breath, because that was probably difficult to get through. So breathe in again, please, and out. See, because here's the thing. We reached a point now where we've actually understood that inspiration can come from inside of us. And it's actually become accepted. When I was living in Mykolaiv, that town I showed you earlier, one of the greatest quotes I've ever come across came up for me, which is this one. Jack London. You can't wait for inspiration to happen. You have to go after it with a club. I loved that quote when I was young, still do. And his basic point that inspiration is up to us, not an outside force, was always on my mind. And here's another great quote from another great writer, William Faulkner, who supposedly said, "I only write when I'm inspired, and fortunately, I'm inspired every day at 9 o'clock." Now, I say supposedly said because that quote is also attributed to other writers, ranging from Peter de Vries to Herman Wouk, Somerset Maugham, and Raymond Chandler. But it doesn't really matter who said it, right? The point is what the quote is. And basically the same point as Jack London made. We generate inspiration. It does not come from outside. And yet, how is that possible? We've just gone through a whole process looking at how for thousands of years, everybody said it only came from outside. And even you typing your stuff in the chat said all the things that inspire you are things that are external to you, stimuluses that happen outside. The beach or the impact you make in the world or a glass of wine, whatever it is, it seems clear that inspiration is beyond our control. I mean, you say things like, "I don't feel inspired today," right? Say things like that. Or "I don't know what to do to feel inspired today," or "I only get inspired in the mornings," or "I only get inspired when I get drunk," or "I only get inspired after I exercise." Or in the case of our Japanese friend, I only get inspired when I almost suffocate myself. So all of us know how to inspire ourselves, but it seems to always take some kind of effort. And this was true for me too for most of my life. Besides smoking a lot of pot, other ways I forced myself to get inspired were to ride up and down on public transport, or the exact opposite, to sit for 10 or 12 hours without leaving my chair. Those were my favorite ways. Sometimes they worked well, sometimes not so well. But eventually I learned to inspire myself. And it's actually intimately tied to my addiction and my recovery. Now, for most of my life, like most people, inspiration was something that came or went, and I had very little to do with it. But what I want to make clear to you is, in case you're not clear about this yet, that idea that inspiration is not something we have control over is a lie. Breathe in. And breathe out. Because the first important fact is that inspiration is breathing, right? That much is obvious. You figured that out by now, right? Inspiration, breathing. Inspire. Let's distinguish, though, between breathing inspiration and the metaphorical idea of inspiration, like, having ideas or being motivated. So let's call breathing inspiration small I inspiration, and metaphorical inspiration big I inspiration. Now, what's less obvious to most people is that inspiration is actually as easy and natural as breathing. Breathe in, inspiration. Breathe out, expiration. Well, we don't usually mean that word the way I'm using it now. But anyway, I want to now have us notice a few things that might transform your experience of inspiration in your life. So here's the first one. Number one, in the beginning was inspiration. Okay. We all have heard the phrase, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's the beginning of the Bible, right? And all of us are pretty advanced thinkers, and we know by now that we create reality in our speaking. I mean, we are speakers, right? We create reality in our language. We create reality in the words that come out of our thoughts. But there's something that comes before the word. I'd like a volunteer to help me. Oh, gosh, sorry. Let me go back to that. In the beginning was inspiration. I'd like to go back to that and ask for a volunteer. Is there anybody here who can help me demonstrate something? And I want you all to do this exercise, but I'd like somebody to help us demonstrate. Who can volunteer?
Thank you, Melanie. Is volunteering.
Thank you, Melanie. Oh, Sapiwe. Okay. I saw Melanie's hand, but whoever wants to, just unmute them and let's do this. And I need you on camera. Okay. Can you spotlight this person for us, Ian?
Yeah, give me a moment. Sapiwe, have you got your camera on?
Oh, did he pick me?
Okay, so here's what I'd like you to do, Spiwe. Breathe out for us. Just breathe out, all the way out. Out, not in, all the way out. Breathe out. Everybody do this. Everybody do this exercise. Everybody breathe out. Do not breathe back in. Just breathe out. Now say something, Spiwe.
Oh.
You had to breathe in again, didn't you?
I had to, yes.
Yeah, so do the exercise as I'm asking, please. Breathe out. All the way out. Now say something. You can't do it, right? So you see, we say you can't do it. See, we say in the beginning was the word, but it's not true. You cannot speak without breathing first. Breathe in, Spiwe, breathe in. And now say something.
Amazing.
Aha, right? You have to breathe first in order to speak. So the Bible kind of skipped that part, because actually in the beginning was the breath. Before the word is the breath. Inspiration precedes creation. You cannot create until you breathe, and you cannot create until you're inspired. That's point number one. Point number two, inspiration is automatic. Who would like to volunteer for this exercise? Come on, people. Melanie Rothman, let's go. Again, please, everybody do this exercise along with Melanie. Melanie, take a little breath in and hold your breath. Just hold your breath. Okay, don't breathe out. Just keep holding your breath. Now, please type in the chat if you think you might have an answer here. Do you know what the world record is for the length of time holding your breath? The longest time anybody's ever held their breath? Don't breathe. Keep holding your breath. Just keep holding your breath. Okay, the actual length of time, the world record for holding your breath is 24 minutes and 3 seconds. Okay, Alex Segura, swimmer and freediver, and he broke his own record by nearly a minute. Melanie, keep holding your breath. Just keep holding your breath. The average person starts to go into medical distress after less than 2 minutes. Much like Melanie. Keep holding your breath, Melanie. Don't breathe. It's a rare person who can last anywhere even close to that Segura's record, 24 minutes, right? After 5 or 6 minutes, there we go. After 5 or 6 minutes, most people's bodies at the most will automatically knock you unconscious and force you to breathe. So Melanie, you took a breath because you just didn't want to suffer, right? Right? But if you were actually in a situation where somehow you could not, you could actually keep from breathing, eventually your body will put you under to force you to breathe. The point is you can try to avoid being inspired, but your body will prevent you from doing it for too long. After you breathe out, you eventually have to breathe in again. Inspiration is not an effort. It's automatic. That's number two. Number three, inspiration automatically creates. So, Melanie, you can testify to this, I'm sure. Holding your inspiration in a bit might feel kind of cool, possibly a bit healthy. Perhaps gives you a bit of power and strength, right? You pull a breath in and you push something, it gives you a bit of force. But very soon it becomes a strain and then an effort, and eventually you can't hold it anymore. You have to exhale. And when you do, guess what happens? Your breath comes out. You're putting a new creation into the world. This is a very important point that might seem simple, but it's very, very important. Inspiration automatically eventually creates output, whether you like it or not. Now, this goes straight at one of our basic lies about creativity. How many people here might have a moment where you think you're not that creative? Now, you probably all know that science tells us that's not true. We're all born creative, just like we're all born knowing how to breathe. I don't know how my 2 children knew how to breathe, but they did. Now, when you breathe in again and breathe out, you're paying attention now, but you realize if you think about it, you've been breathing this whole time. What time is it now? 30 minutes in, you've been breathing, whether you're paying attention or not. And every time you breathe out, you're mixing the air that you breathed in with waste from your body, expelling the waste, mostly carbon dioxide. Plants enjoy it. We're giving them the nutrients they need. Even if we don't like it, the plants do. Whatever we're creating is actually useful for something. So take the case that blocking your creative inspiration is the same as blocking your physical inspiration. It cannot last long and it does not work out well. Now, most successful creative people know that most of their output is waste, junk, useless. Me personally, when I write, up to 80%, 90% of what I write, I have to rewrite. And as a filmmaker, most of what I've shot is never seen by anybody. Ernest Hemingway very famously said, the first draft of anything is shit. Same with breathing. Most of what comes out of us is junk. Still do it. So, number 4, inspiration feels great, doesn't it? Everybody here feel great when you're inspired? Now, the reason it feels great is because inspiration is half of a process of cleansing. We bring in fresh nutrients, mostly oxygen and nitrogen. It enriches our bodies. It cleanses it out when we breathe it out, and cleansing feels good. And, I invite you to start looking at big I inspiration the same way. It doesn't need to be good stuff that comes out. It's just cleansing you. Creativity feels good because it cleanses you. It's not logical to expect that your creative product should be any more useful than your breath that comes out. It makes perfect sense that it is shit. Breathing feels good, and so does creativity. And that is why so many studies have shown that great health benefits to creativity: increased lifespan, reduced risk of dementia, increased intelligence, and even a strengthened immune system. On my website, we got all kinds of statistics about that. You can go check. But now, just so we know you're still here, type yes in the chat if feeling inspired and being creative makes you feel great. Just say yes. And say no if it doesn't. Okay. Here we go, number 5. Inspiration is a cycle, right? That's pretty obvious. All this talk of inspiration as breathing brings us back to the key question. Breathing comes from inside of us, right? The output follows the input, and the input follows the output. So getting inspired is directly related to your output. If you're holding your breath, you cannot breathe in again. You have to breathe out first. So the same way that we started this conversation with the numbers, saying that you can only create when you're inspired, you can also only get inspired when you create. See, if you don't breathe out, you can't breathe in again. And here's the surprising thing that you might not know. Inhaled air is almost the same as exhaled air. The big difference is the carbon dioxide. Exhaled air has about 100 times more. But the nitrogen and oxygen is very similar. Inhaled air is 20% oxygen. Exhaled air is 16% oxygen. And almost the same amount of nitrogen as well. In other words, the carbon dioxide really helps the plants. But if you're trapped in a small space, you can survive on your own exhaled air for quite some time, right? Inspiration is a cycle. Your creative output is what actually inspires you again. Again, breathe in, hold your breath for a second. Breathe out. And that's how creativity works. Before you can breathe in again, you gotta breathe out. Number 6, inspiration is a collaboration, okay? If you were Alex Segura, you could still be holding your breath, Melanie. And if you were still holding your breath, I would ask you this question. When you breathe out now, does the breath come out from you by you forcing it out? Or is the outside air pulling the breath from you? And when you breathe in, is the outside pushing the air into you, or are you pulling it in? Well, it depends how you look at it, doesn't it? Because like I said, if you hold your breath too long, your body will force the air out. But if you are out of breath and you're unconscious, the air will actually go into your body without you breathing it. So it's kind of hard to know the difference, whether it's the outside or the inside. Holding your breath is hard unless, for a long time, it's hard, right, Melanie? Holding your breath is hard for a long time, but normally you don't even notice you're breathing. And the question really is, are you breathing, or is the universe breathing you? But the bigger question is, does it even matter? Because number 7, inside is outside. See, it seems best to think of breathing as a collaboration between inside of our body and the outside of our body, right? Both participate somehow. The air outside comes in and the air inside goes out. It's a collaboration between myself and the universe. That's what creativity is too. And I don't mean just physically a collaboration, like the inside and the outside both contribute. But there's a spiritual collaboration too, right? Trees need us. Without us, trees don't have what they need. But we need trees too, because without trees, we don't get the oxygen we need. In the same way, we benefit from being creative. We already talked about the many health benefits. But what we lose sight of is that we also benefit the world around us in ways that we don't even see. Even when our creativity seems like shit. See, the thing is that a very famous statistic is that 98% of us at 5 years old are creative geniuses, and only 2% of us are creative geniuses now as adults. And that applies, that means most of us in this room, in fact, there's not even 50 people here. So I don't think any of us are geniuses. Kind of hard to believe, right? I mean, look at the people in this room. But somehow we took the natural state of breathing that we were born with, and we found a way to suffocate ourselves the same way that Nakamitsu does. Except somehow he suffocates himself and creates genius from it. We suffocate ourselves and we worry about how do we get breath back? How do we actually get inspired when it actually should be something that is just natural? And this is a slide I'm going to show you quickly. The quote that I also think is beautiful. There's no difference between the creator and creation, just as there is no difference between the ocean and its waves. There is no difference between the creator and creation, just as there is no difference between the ocean and its waves. And when you start to realize what this quote means, then you can start to see that the source of creative inspiration is neither inside you nor outside you, but it's both, right? So I'd like to hear from a couple of, well, all of you in the chat, what you've gotten so far from what I've shared with you. Because I'm about to then give you one last little bit. One last little thing. Keep breathing. Yes, Jeff, definitely. Because I'm going to give you the last little twist. Now, I seem to have forgotten the background on it, so you'll just have to hear it, not see it. We started this talk by saying that inspiration clearly comes from outside of us. We've ended the talk up till now seeing that inspiration can come from inside of us. Now I want to give you the final twist. Actually, inspiration can only come from inside of us. Because think back to that list of things that inspire you. Who is it that is inspired? Raise your hand if you're inspired in the morning. Okay, look around the room. Some of you aren't and some of you are, right? Keep your hand up if you're inspired at night. Ian's, oh, I thought Ian was always inspired. So you see some people are inspired in the morning, some people are inspired at night. Is it obviously not the morning that's inspiring, is it? It's Ian that's inspired by the morning. It's you that likes the music. It's you that likes the wine. It's you that likes the landscape. It's me that likes the beach or the marijuana. Whatever is happening outside of us to inspire us is really only happening inside. If it was the outside that did it, then everyone would have the same reaction, right? But it's not. It is our own personality and our own way of seeing things. A personality we've built up throughout our life that limits us to only being inspired in the morning. So you put your hand down when I say, are you inspired at night? And then you sit there at night going like, what am I going to do to inspire myself? Well, what if you took control? What if you choose to be inspired by whatever is happening right now? Why couldn't you just choose to be inspired by things you don't think inspire you? Inspiration is 100% inside. The Greeks screwed it up. They had it wrong all those years. If you want to know the secret to creative inspiration, it's simply that. Be inspired whenever you choose to. Now, you might be sitting here going, what? Right? Like, how's that going to help me? Try it. Go home. Well, you're probably home now, but today or tomorrow, when you finish with this 24-hour extravaganza, try to get inspired by something that doesn't normally inspire you. Ian, if you don't get inspired at night, try to get inspired at night. Just give it a shot. Now, here's the real question. Ian, have you ever been inspired at night?
Sure, of course.
So then you know how to be inspired at night, right? So why keep putting something in your way? Creativity can be that simple. And that's the most important thing I want you to take away from this talk, right? And again, a little slide I want to share with you. A guy named G.K. Chesterton said, never invoke the gods unless you really want them to appear. It annoys them very much. So let's stop blaming the situation for our lack of inspiration, because the gods get annoyed by it. And you don't want the gods annoyed at you. It's not going to help you. Another couple of things we can say about inspiration. Remember this famous quote? Inspiration doesn't actually matter that much. Thomas Edison said it very well. Genius is 1% inspiration. The rest is work. And finally, Picasso says inspiration exists and you have to find it work. A very similar quote, right? So I want to leave you with this. And it's an important question I want to raise with you, and I've left 15 minutes here for it. Getting inspired is easy, guys. Wherever you're finding yourself not inspired, then just get inspired. It's inspiring other people that's tricky. And that is our job, isn't it? As speakers, whatever type of speaker you are, call yourself inspirational, transformational, motivational, inspiration remains critical. A motivational speaker inspires people to action. A transformational speaker inspires people to transform. And the same truths, the same 8 points I gave you tonight apply. Breathing. Breathe in and out. Open your mouth and inspire people. It is just as easy as inspiring yourself, and all of it is easy. So the question I want to raise in the time we have left is for you guys to share, how do you inspire people? What's the secret? What's the trick you use to inspire people when you speak? Ian, the floor is yours to lead that conversation. Thank you. You might want to unmute though.
So I'm going to switch myself to a gallery view. I've taken the spotlight off Michael for now. And let's have a bit of a look at the conversation. So feel free to raise your hand if you want to make a verbal comment, put comments in the chat. Let's engage with this question from Michael. How do you inspire? Michael, maybe you want to just repeat the question for us, please?
Yeah, how do you inspire people when you're speaking? Whether it's what inspire them into action, inspire them into transforming, inspire them into being inspired. How do you do it?
Cool. So let's get conversation in the chat, or raise your hand and let's get some voice conversation as well. So we've got a few things in the chat going on, Michael. So we've got faith in a certain thing. We've got challenge them, stories, interesting ones coming through. Anybody else? Capturing their imagination. You going to comment on any of these, Michael?
I want to hear some people talk. This is a speakers event.
We want to get some voices. It
voices.
is a speaker convention, so maybe we should have some speaking.
Did I inspire people to say anything? That's the question. Did I inspire any thinking here?
Let's hear some stories. Let's just not have the sort of 3-word answers. Let's have some stories. Let's get some conversation going. Who can lead the way? Just raise your hand. Roger, let's go to you.
Right. I love inspiring people when I'm talking to them. I can remember an evening when I was speaking to about 50 women at a Standard Bank in Florida Road many years ago. And one woman arrived a bit late and she was looking a bit flustered. And she sat there looking as though she was completely not listening to me at all, but completely worried about whatever it was that was concerning her. And I don't know how I did this, but I focused my attention on that woman while talking to all the others. But I kept going back to her and focusing my voice and my body language on her, without mentioning her, without making it obvious. And by the end of the talk, I had her. She was listening, she was happy, she was relaxed, I'd managed to reel her in. And to this day, I don't know quite what I did. But isn't that what we do when we have a group in front of us? It's a bugger when it's 5,000, because it's so difficult to focus or to make people feel that you're focusing on them. I know you have to try. I know you have to look at different parts of the audience. It's even worse when you're on a stage and the stage is well lit and they're in the dark. The first time I ever did that, it was terrifying because you can't see the people you're looking at and you need them to feed off. But if you can see them, you can inspire them. I find you can inspire them a lot more easily than if you're just acting. And you're just acting if you can't see them and exchange connection. That's my view.
Excellent, Roger. Thank you very much. Chris Voicey, let's go over to you next.
Yeah, it just struck me, Ian, that I think one of the important things is to get people out of their normality, because we get stuck in normal life. You know, life goes on in a certain way. And I think we inspire people by kind of challenging them out of their normality to see that life has possibilities. Earlier, I put down the word redemption. I love the word redemption because what it's saying is actually there's something else that can happen. There's something else that can still happen in life that's going to make your life better than it actually now is. So the idea of like, I think inspiration is taking people out of the normal and saying there are all sorts of things that are possible.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. Let's see, who else has got a contribution? How do you inspire others in your speaking? Robin, go ahead, please.
Great to see you all and good to be a part of this great conversation. Michael, thank you for that contribution. What comes to me, what comes up for me is state, that mind, body, emotion connection. And yes, we can use story and yes, we can use words. However, in neurosemantics, one of the things we learn, one of the presuppositions that we learn is to go there first. So in one sense, what comes up for me in this moment is I apply it to self. So the stuff that I'm teaching, the stuff that I'm sharing is stuff that I own myself. So it's not something that I'm still trying to figure out. And when I've applied it to self, it's authentic, it's real. And even, it's amazing. I don't know about you guys, but I'm finding even on a platform like this one, where looking at a plastic screen and with pieces of metal and moving parts, and yet it can have this sensation, this experience that it's a real in-room connection. And somehow through the Internet of Things or through quantum, I don't really understand, but what I get is that because of the words that I use, the way that I think and feel, and the experience that someone listening can experience for themselves, a physical experience, an emotional experience, and a cognitive experience, they can create a state for themselves. And when we get good at creating states in our audience, that's when we have that inspiritus, the spirit within, that inspiring experience. And perhaps it is the same story. Perhaps I get it right, that my story matches or maps well to someone that's listening. But often it's not. Often, actually, it's got nothing to do with my story, and it's all about the experience of that person who's listening and what's happening for them. And I'm loving the feedback I'm getting in coaching, in training, in speaking, that even on this digital platform, when I go there first, when I go into states, when I use my mind and my body and my emoting, and I embody, so I get from the head into the body, into the heart of what I'm sharing, then that experience is transferred, almost transmuted across the Internet of Things, and people can have incredible experiences in their own world. I wonder, does that make sense?
Certainly does, Robin. Well done. Thank you very much. Great contribution. I see lots of heads nodding while you were talking. Thanks, Robin. Let's take one more, and then we'll take a short break. So let's take one more. One more person. Tell us about your speaking and how it inspires and creates. Al Progers, let's go with you.
I made him do that with my mind. I saw Al and I was like, I want Al to say something, and he did.
Oh, just going to need to unmute.
These are not the droids you're looking for, Michael. Thank you for using the Force. Lovely to see you all. Lovely to see Michael for the first time in 15 years. I think perhaps the simplest way to motivate or inspire people is to value them. I recall about a few years ago, I was sent to a mine to go and do some creative ways of communicating safety. And I failed dismally, not for the first or the last time, but I failed dismally until I understood what life on a mine was like and valued these people working every day in circumstances where everything is trying to kill them constantly. And until I valued them and respected them, even though they're not eloquent, even though they are rough and people who are very different from me, but until I could value what they did, I could not communicate with them. I couldn't reach them at all. And I think perhaps that's a very important step before we think of what we are transmitting to other people, is how valuable they are. Thank you.
Ian, may I ask for two things before we go?
Quickly, very quickly. People haven't had a break in 2 hours.
Okay. I'm going to make it very quick. I'll make it one thing instead.
Okay.
Two things. Ready? Everybody, breathe in. And breathe out. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Let's give Michael applause. Excellent job. Well done, Michael, and really inspired us. And Michael, just go and look through all the comments. There's some really positive comments there, and you certainly have done a wonderful job for us this evening. So I'm going to put up a 5-minute timer. When I come back, I'm going to hand over to a new MC, but let's have a quick body break, and we will start again in 5 minutes.